Welcome to Romance Unzipped, your happily ever after book club.
Hey, I'm Annie.
Hi, I'm Holly.
This is Romance Unzipped, your happily ever after book club. Today we read The Wallflower Wager by Tessa.
This is book 3 in the Girl Meets Duke series, and in this book there are a lot of pets.
There are a lot of pets, hence Talisker and Sofie making a gratuitous cameo. It's historical romance set in London.
This is a male-female. I would say it's probably around the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, hot water and plumbing is the newest thing. And
we're following Gabriel Duke, who is the male lead, and Lady Penelope Campion,
aka Penny. Yes.
So she is high to do in society, and he is born low socially, but now he's rich. So he's wormed his way into the social circles of the dukes and ladies of the time.
It's a dual point of view, third person, past tense.
I would say the steam level is a 3.
Yeah, it's a 3. There's definitely sex on scene. There's use of descriptive words, but also it's not
overly detailed.
You're not going to sweat on public transit.
Nope.
I don't think. You might, but probably if you dabble in the steam very often, it's more like...
This one shouldn't scandalize anyone.
No, it's like a mild salsa, but it's still salsa. So our tropes, there are many tropes. There's a pretty hardcore, grumpy, like highly optimistic sunshine going on. There's the Duke's trope, but it's a sneak attack trope because he's not actually a Duke. He's super wealthy with the last name.
And his last name is Duke. I was very confused by that.
We were both, because they kept saying Mr. Duke, and we're like, what? In the Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke, we were talking about how confusing it is because the Duke doesn't have the last name of the land, and they're like called 14 different things. And this one, they're just straight up Mr. Duke.
Mr. Duke. And one of the friends actually does go by Ashbury, and at one point she says, well, his given name is George, and he hates that. So again, we do see a little bit of that, but my confusion came just from Gabriel, Gabe. That's what Penny called him all book long, but it was just when he was interacting with other people that I got slightly confused.
Yeah, we found, so he's Gabriel Duke. And then there's the she's all that trope. I think that hardcore needs to be a trope. It's like the 90s classic with Freddie Prinze Jr. and
Rachel Lee Cook.
And she wears overalls and glasses.
And she is so ugly. Nobody would ever want anything to do with her.
She has art class. There's paint on her overalls. And then so Freddie Prinze Jr. does the 90s like wager that he can make her hot or whatever. And then she takes off her glasses and everyone's like, oh my God.
Oh, girl.
So this has...
Where have you been all my life?
Wait a minute.
She's got a little bit of that where...
Is there a new girl at school?
Nobody has any respect for her, and she will often say throughout the book things like, oh, it doesn't matter. My reputation can't be ruined. I don't even have a reputation.
People don't even notice me. And he's using these like superlative, beautiful terms to describe her. And he's like, how can no one have noticed her? But we know because she's all that. So that's one of the tropes. And then there's
also, her brother is in charge of her because of the patriarchy. And
yeah.
Her parents are alive, but they're off in India, I think, as ambassadors, something like that. So she's got this timeline where he says, oh, that's it. You're not falling in line with society. I'm going to move you back to our ancestral home up in, I think, middle of nowhere, northern England, where he lives. And I'm going to be coming there in a month, so...
I'm your ward, you adult person.
Yes, I get to choose what happens, and you can't be in London anymore because you are so weird.
You're too eccentric.
Yes, exactly. You
There's
like animals.
Paint on your overalls. So that is a trope. And then discovering your freedom, finding value in yourself. Is that a trope? Maybe that's more of a story arc.
Character arc.
Okay.
But she goes through this. I found it kind of interesting that between the two leads, it wasn't really a rivals to lovers and it wasn't a friends to lovers. They didn't really have a established relationship.
There wasn't animosity.
No, there wasn't. And he definitely has a reputation of being, he's called the Duke of Ruin. And he's got a reputation of being just this horrible person.
It sounds like the title of a Rena Kent novel.
Ooh. But she doesn't fall into that. She very quickly says, well, the first person that knows what it means when the newspapers write a name about you. It might not be true. So they have a a very non-contentious, like neutral relationship at the start, and then it blooms into love.
Yes, I think a trope, is this a trope or is it a plot device? Lots of wacky animals. That's
Yeah, it's certainly a big part of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, menagerie. Is that it? Anyways.
Dr. Dolittle.
Dr. Doolittle. Yeah. Plot talk.
The meet cute in this one is kind of fun. She knows that her neighbor's house, the next door neighbor, has been sold to a new person who's renovating it, and nobody has moved in yet. And one of her animals, is it the hedgehog?
It's the parrot.
The parrot?
Delilah.
Okay. Delilah the parrot wanders off and flies in through the open window, and it's in the middle of the night. So she's like, I've got to go rescue this parrot.
My poor parrot, who cannot be okay on its own, although it can fly.
To be rescued. So she just puts on some kind of scantily clad, like dressing gown type thing. She's not fully dressed, and she has an old key from when her neighbor gave it to her parents 30 years ago, and she breaks into this house. And of course, the parrot keeps moving from room to room, and she's chasing after
Drawing her ever deeper.
Yes, deeper into the
until
labyrinth.
she gets to his bedchambers.
And she notices that it looks so nice and it's not dusty.
And it's such a big bed.
Oh, yes. So she is diving onto the bed, trying to like grasp the parrot's talon. And right then he walks in. And of course, he was just taking a bath.
And he's wet and naked.
Well, he's got a towel sort of loosely draped, but it's not doing.
They're rivulets and hard plains.
Yes.
And she's mesmerized.
Laying on his bed in a nightgown, basically, and he's mostly naked. And there's this parrot. And that is when they meet each other. And he's, of course, like, good God, woman, who are you? What are you doing here? And she's saying, oh, I'm just looking for my parrot.
That old line.
Yeah, as if that answers everything. So that's where they first meet, and he is so interested. The way he's made his money is he's bought up things and then resold them, like flipping houses or buying up people's debt. That's why all the dukes and well-to-do hate him so much, because he recognizes ways that he can buy up somebody's debt and then force them to sell it back to him or to pay up or end up reclaiming their land. So he's kicked out a lot of these rich people from their homes because he now owns it because they went into debt for whatever reason.
Yeah, he's like a self-serving Robin Hood. He does not redistribute the wealth. He just undermines the super wealthy and keeps it.
Yes, and he says, like, it's perfectly legal. He has no problem with it ethically. And Penny brings it up at one point and he says, they all made this money off of serfs and stealing the land. Slaves. I'm not taking anything that they earned anyway.
Yeah, and she said, you mean families like mine? And he goes, yeah.
Exactly.
So he has a real anger with the aristocracy, but she's a bit apart from the aristocracy and she doesn't live in the world that he is so derisive of. And so they're kind of equally outsiders on this kind of wealth plane, I guess. So what does Gabriel look like?
He is a hunk.
No way.
He's got dark hair. She talks frequently how his whiskers and his stubble comes in so quickly that when he shaves in the morning, he's got a beard by the end of the day.
A sign of virility.
And she's really into that. She calls him dark a few times. She doesn't describe his skin at any point in time. And it was hard for me in context to tell if she meant he was kind of broody and his demeanor was dark, or if he literally was a darker skinned person. It was not clear to me.
No, there wasn't ever like a specific description of his skin tone or skin color.
But she did call his eyes black.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and his facial features are like his hair and stuff is dark.
And he's very muscular and tall, which are the hallmarks. You can tell it's a romance novel when it starts out and the man is tall. That's always a good giveaway. She, on the other hand, is petite. She has fair skin, flax golden hair, china blue eyes, and yet no one during this time period who they all highly value these specific physical traits. No one seems to have noticed her.
And she has a 40,000-pound dowry, which I don't really understand what inflation has done to the economy of London from this time period, but it sounds like a lot.
It was a lot, but she had a goat, so.
Right.
Ooh.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants a girl with a
dowry.
goat.
She's the daughter of an earl. She went to all the most impressive boarding schools and finishing schools. She's got all this pedigree. But when it was time for her to make her debut in society, she went to this dance, and she brought
a hedgehog.
She brought a hedgehog in her pocket, and she later says that she was nervous about it, and this was her like comfort animal basically. And so she bumped into a boy, and a few quills shot out of the hedgehog into his hip, and he screamed, and then she screamed, and then she tumbled to the ground, and the hedgehog rolled out of her pocket across the dance floor. So it's that kind of a book.
Yeah, and that was the scarring factor that has kept her from the tone, like society. So it's a real people problems, pretty big deal right there. I will say in 7th grade, on the first week of school, we had lockers, which were very cool. And I played sports, and so I was like getting my stuff out from my locker, and my bag fell, and my green underwear fell on my crush's binder right underneath. And we both looked at it and looked at each other. So I'm feeling I could really relate to Penny's.
That is brutal.
It was very...
I'm so sorry.
I know, I was like, oh, maybe he didn't see him. He did.
Yeah, okay.
But fortunately, he didn't know who I was. So,
great.
Yeah.
You also had the she's all that going on?
She's all that.
So Penny is she's not really like a recluse. She does go out and about, but she's just interested in helping animals because she's got such a strong drive to mother things and help things, and all of God's creatures are special. So it's not just any animal. She collects damaged animals.
Parallel to Gabriel, yes. Parallel to herself, yes. Healing wounded creatures that like people have thrown away. It's very parallel.
Yes, there were some themes that went through this book, kind of in every scene.
Yeah.
So I'll just briefly talk about her animals. So she's got Bixby, a terrier that the 2 back legs had been crushed in some kind of a carriage accident. So she's got a friend, like a human woman friend, who is a brilliant inventor who made this wheelchair contraption. So the back legs are kind of suspended and the dog's able to walk around. She's got a goat that she insists has indigestion, and as soon as Gabriel sees it, he's like, your goat's pregnant. And then again, another theme. She's like, no, my goat would never do that.
She's not that kind of goat.
She's not that kind of goat.
Or like a goat that is a goat, you mean?
Right, and so they have this kind of tongue-in-cheek throughout the book of like, yeah, that's what a lot of dads have said about their daughters, but I don't know what you think is going on here.
Basic animal instinct.
And then there's a steer.
Angus, the Highland steer. So it's one of those like Scottish Highland huge ones with the fuzzy little bangs or hairy bangs. Actually, not unlike our Minotaur in Morning Glory Milking Farm.
Yeah,
he had that same kind of
similar
reddish.
Okay. And those 2 are bonded mates. She wants to make sure they stay together.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an otter and the hedgehog that we mentioned. I think 13 kittens. 3 hens that are laying hens, but they don't actually lay eggs, which is why she has them, because the farmer that had them didn't want them anymore. So she just collects all of these outcast animals and the parrot Delilah, and she loves them so much. And it's one of the ways that at the very beginning that Gabriel is so intrigued by her, because she's walking around murmuring like, "Oh, I love you. You're so sweet. I'll do anything for you." And he's kind of imagining like, "Ooh, this beautiful woman is saying these things."
Ooh.
Standing right next to me.
Oh, is this what it's going to sound like? And Delilah, the parrot, it should be noted, she thinks was from a sweet old lady, and very well had been a sweet old lady, but also that sweet lady had been a madam of a brothel. So the parrot is equipped with some great terms like fancy a fuck love, which it comes out with a lot, and then kind of like sex
noises.
That's
what the parrot parrots. And again,
the parrots.
It's Gabe that figures this out, because she's saying, I don't know what she's saying. Is it
a cup of tea?
And he says, no. And again, she's incredulous, like, that's not where my parrot came from. And he says, yes, it is. I don't know where else she would have heard these things. So she's always got this persona and optimism where she sees the best in everyone, whereas he is more realistic, and he does kind of bring her back to earth a few times.
Yeah.
But he's not mean about it.
No, he's never mean about it.
He's a very authentic, charming man. He just has such a hard past that he's got a hard shell on him still.
The animals played kind of a sweet little role in the main driver of the whole plot.
So there are two competing factors, or in tandem factors, that are pushing her to get rid of these animals. So one thing is her brother that we talked about. He says, you can't stay here anymore, you silly, foolish woman. Clearly there's something wrong with you and I need to bring you back into my care because you've got all these animals. And Aunt Caroline comes over.
Aunt Caroline sweeps into the room.
Is the one that delivers the news about the brother. And Penny is saying, oh, please help me, Caroline. You know I don't want to go live with him. Like, you could argue on my behalf. And she says, I will, but only if you make some strides at becoming a part of society. So you've got a few weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to do this. You need to get rid of all these animals. You need to get your name in the paper and
the society pages.
In the society pages, and people need to know who you are, and you need to stop being this eccentric.
So weird.
Yeah, you're such a weirdo.
So weird.
So she's got all this stress because she doesn't want to do those things, and she certainly doesn't want to get rid of her animals, but she has to in order to stay. And even if she fails at all this and she gets kidnapped and taken back to her home where Bradford lives, they're going to make her get rid of the animals anyway.
So she might as well be like the agent and decide herself where her animals end up. So it's not perfect, but it's better than returning to this rural manor. So she's like, okay, I've got to make myself into a lady and I've got to house these animals.
I've got to get a new wardrobe. I have to get invited to some balls and events. How am I going to do this? So she's kind of lamenting this problem and telling Gabriel about it. And he has his own motivations. He's trying to flip this house and resell it. And he's so clear that the way he's going to make the most money is if a lady lives next door.
Hot lady.
Because the up-and-coming members of society would pay a lot of money to live next to a lady. Because then they could marry into I don't know.
Yeah.
The dukedom.
Yeah.
Not really sure how it works, but that is his special sauce.
Yeah, maybe it's not even that they would get to marry her. It's that like the proximity to her fanciness levels up their credibility.
Yep.
So he is just exploiting people's shallow greed everywhere.
Once again, he's his own personal Robin Hood.
Yes. Yeah.
What a good role to have in life.
I know, right? So he's been doing all this makeovers to the house, enter hot water and plumbing, all these different renovations, but he's like, I have to keep this super hot lady that no one's tapped yet next door because if she moves, there goes some of my property value.
So when she says, oh, my brother Bradford has this plan, he's saying, oh, whoa, I'll help. I will. You figure out the wardrobe.
I need you.
Yeah, I need you.
And she goes, oh.
I need you.
And he goes, uh-oh.
Yeah, I didn't mean it like that. So he says, I'm going to figure out how to get rid of your animals. I will get you invitations to these society things, even though he himself is on the outskirts and nobody
invites him. He's the Duke of Ruin.
He at least he knows how to pull strings. He knows people.
Yeah.
They don't like him, but he knows people.
He
and
can
he
get a wardrobe.
Favors.
Yeah. And he can house a steer.
Oh, he's got a steer in his pants.
He's got a steer in his pants.
That out. So he at first is very uncharitable with her motivations. He's like, oh, this is all in his own head. He's not saying this to her. I'm in a hurry. This is too important. I'm just going to take all those animals and just dump them somewhere. And I'll tell her that they had a great
glue factory.
Yeah, we're going to name your cow Elmer. And off he goes. But pretty quickly, he has a change of heart because she is just so lovely. And she puts so much effort into these animals. And a couple of times, one or both of them make the connection of, oh yeah, if she's willing to give them this kind of love and attention, what would she do for me, even though I'm also an outcast?
I am an urchin.
Yes.
So. And he also, very obviously, is a tenderoni. So his tough exterior and gruff front side houses the fact that he just wants to be loved, that he was kicked from the nest at a young age, aka sold by his mom for gin. And so he has all this childhood trauma, but really he just wants someone to love him. And so he also loves these creatures, even though he kind of pretends he doesn't.
Right.
But
He
we
pretends
know.
it's a pain in his ass. And they actually are a pain in his ass.
Yeah, they are.
But he loves them.
Yeah.
So there are various hijinks. They're entertaining. She goes off to try to rehome the otter. And he says, oh, this is great. I know somebody. Their 5-year-old boy really wants a ferret. And she says, but he's not a ferret. And Gabe says, Gabe's not going to know the difference. But on the way there, their carriage breaks down. They're near a river. The otter jumps into the river. And he's gone. I really thought she was going to somehow find the otter and it was going to come back. But the
Otter's like,
just
finally.
swam away. That got rid of that problem.
I don't want to live in a London house. I'm an otter.
Yeah, this is my chance. And she's not being cruel. She was saying,
No.
but he's lived in captivity his whole life. I don't even remember what injury led the otter to living with her. But
often it was people's really terrible concept of I'm going to have this cool pet, and then the reality of I'm not equipped to have an otter.
I don't need this in my life. So she was worried about a like habituated pet trying to fend for herself in the wild.
She's not a meanie.
But then Gabriel's like, this is not your property. Just let the otter go. The otter found a river. Because she tries to run into the river. She does, like, march into the river to go after it. So then he goes after her.
She takes off her stockings. She shows her ankles.
She hikes up her skirt. She fords into this freezing river.
And then she goes in, and guess what? She's all wet. And guess what? He likes it.
He follows her.
He can see her boobies.
That particular scene ends with him licking her nipple.
Yeah.
Well, maybe more like a suck.
Yeah, and it's like a full in the bank muddy lay. It's not just like he popped across the river and licked her nipple. It's like a
there's some.
It's like a wet hump.
Yeah, that's.
And a not often used phrase that maybe can get a little more play now that we brought it to light.
I like that. It was a wet hump. Okay, I'll have to think about that. Maybe add it to my lexicon.
You heard it here first. It's going to be hot on the romance circuit.
So there's one part, like a little bit of a side plot that I wasn't really into. She's got friends, and clearly they are the characters of the first couple of books in the series.
And they have real dukes.
They're paired off. They have real dukes. And she talks at the beginning of the book how they used to spend so much time together, and now they're still close, but her friends are married now, so they just are busy, and some of them have kids, and blah, blah, blah. So at one point, they kind of all just descend on her house, and it's when we meet them all, and there's 3 ladies, and I think they're all 3 married, or maybe 2 of them are married. There's all these characters at once.
2 are married, 3 ladies, and one we get a clue that she has a secret sex life because they all thought that she only ever focused on science, but she says some little in the know commentary about romance, and everyone's like, oh.
Ooh. So they all show up, and they're just over the top, like, we're here to protect you. Oh, look who your neighbor is.
Yeah, they were annoying.
Duke of Ruin. And they're all repeating each other, talking about the ways in which he financially ruined one of these dukes that they know, and, oh, you need to stay away from him. And they're giving her no respect, no agency, just steamrolling her. And she's saying, yeah, he's my neighbor. He's fine. Leave me alone. He's helping me rehome my animals. This is a mutually beneficial.
Where you bitches been?
Yeah. And he's the only person in her whole life, even though he's grumpy and he storms in and these people don't like him and he's kind of giving him back the same sort of sass and bad attitude. He's the only person that says, leave her alone. She's a grown woman. I'm not going to listen to you. If she wants me to leave, I'll leave, but this is not about you.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. There's one after the Otter River escapade, and they come back the next day and their clothes are a disaster, and all the husbands, all 2 of the husbands and all 3 of the ladies are there, and they're like, how could you? And the men folk are throwing them up against the wall in one room, and the ladies are like quizzing
her.
In the other room, and the guys are like, what have you done to her? And you have to tell us what happened. And he said, I'm not going to tell you anything. You can ask your friend, and if she wants to share, that's her decision. I was like, way to go, turn of the century London dude.
And she was very charmed by that. Every time he would say something like that, even when usually the context was gruff and he was almost kind of mean about it just because his demeanor is so grumpy, it made her swoon instantly.
Yeah.
She was not fooled by his grumpy exterior.
I mean, it's a great line. I was very impressed. I was like, way to go, Gabe. Mm-hmm. Well played. Long con, he's actually the Duke of Roon. Just kidding. He's not a bad guy to her. Okay, so we know a bit of Gabriel's backstory. What is Penny's backstory? Why is she so guarded, or not guarded, but uses this animals and isolation as a shield?
Well, she tells Gabriel fairly early on about this whole story with her debut and the hedgehog rolling across the floor. And he very quickly says, like, okay, that's funny, but what's your real problem? And she kind of gets prickly inside because
Like a hedgehog?
Like a hedgehog, yeah. Because she says, oh, that usually works with people. I can tell them that, and that they're satisfied.
Yeah, they're like,
the
horror.
And it's still many chapters before she's finally comfortable enough to tell him. But it comes to a head where he decides to throw this grand ball and invite her. And he says, I'm going to propose to you. And she wants him to. But I need you to prove to everyone in society that you had choices and you're not being manipulated. And it's not that I was holding over some kind of blackmail or debt that you chose me.
Like I do with everyone else.
So I want you to dance with all of these men and be very available. And then when you choose me, people will know that it was because you actually love me.
Sounds like an excellent fiction logic to me.
For sure. So as he's setting all this up and he says, oh yeah, here's a list of 10 men you're going to dance with. She just breaks down. It's like, I'm not doing that. And this is a major trigger warning here. She then kind of feels comfortable enough to tell him, she says, oh, I've never told this to anyone before. But she describes how when she was a child, her father's best friend, who would always come around the house, groomed her and then sexually assaulted her for a number of years. And he did this under the ruse of, well, let's have dancing lessons. So he would take her into the study and just like touch her.
Ew,
it wasn't
too many.
It wasn't super detailed in the description, but it was clear from her retelling of what happened. And there are probably a lot of folks that maybe don't want to read about that. So keep that in mind.
And also just broad statement, always read the trigger story.
Yeah,
I mean, trigger warnings at the beginning of every story because you just never know.
Yeah, these things just pop up. This seemed... Well, she clearly...
We knew there was a little trauma.
That there was some trauma going on.
Trauma trap.
But I wasn't expecting this until she started to talk about it. And I was kind of like, oh no. Yeah. And then she said more. I'm like, oh, it is what I was fearing.
Yeah, so always read them at the beginning because we don't always think to make an announcement. So it's just like...
Yes. Luckily, that's pretty ubiquitous now in most books. So
I think
hopefully you won't
par for the course in romance novels, honestly. Like I think romance novels kind of have set the standard in, I don't know if all novels do that, but
do that?
I don't know, but romance novels are really on it. They're like, look, we get it. People are fragile-ish, but strong.
Well, and you just don't necessarily want to deal with certain things when you're having an escapist, lighthearted, or even non-lighthearted, but when you're turning to your hobby.
Yeah.
That's not when you want to deal with certain things, and that's fine.
Yeah. We read Holding Out for a Holiday Hero, and it's silly and campy, and then all of a sudden there's this like side punch about this miscarriage, and we're like, whoa, that was out of the blue. So you just never know.
Sometimes these do show up.
Yeah.
So she does work through telling him, and he's so supportive, and he ends up actually challenging the man who did this to her to a duel.
Of course.
And that becomes the final kind of scene, almost like grovel scene for them. They never break up in this book, but they do have a couple of situations where things get really tense and she gets mad at him and he kind of did some dumb things because he was scared and he's trying to protect her and it all boils down to her saying, you don't have to protect me, let me protect myself. Like, don't keep these secrets from me just because you think it's what I want. But they don't break up. And he doesn't actually follow through with the duel. Yeah. So it's the angst is very low.
His backstory is it's broadcast much clearer from the start, just in his thinking even. So we don't hear Penny thinking about her experience. We just know she has a strong aversion to going back to the countryside. But he's always kind of thinking about like where I came from and who I am and I'm not worthy. So Penny, after they begin having sex regularly, Penny decides to totally butt into his personal life hugely, finds the orphanage that he's kind of created and funds in this like wonderful place that he wishes he had instead of being at the workhouse as a child, And it's like, surprise, we're going to go back. We're going to go do something today. I found a place for these 13 kittens, bundles them up and drives them to the orphanage, which I was like, you've got to like chat with someone and get a little consent on that one first. And secondary consent, never bring a box of 13 kittens to a house full of children without consent.
She did clear it with the orphanage.
Okay, cool.
Yes, they knew that the kittens were coming. But he didn't know. She just said, oh yeah, we're taking the kittens. I found a home for them.
Yeah, okay, that's
and then,
fair.
Surprise, oh look, you're kind-hearted after all. Look, you made this orphanage.
Oh, look, and he's like, stop looking at me.
I just paid in money. They're not my charges.
I don't even like this. Who are they? What? So we go through and they see everything and we see what a softie he is and how well he's taking care of them. And then they walk out into the streets and he's like, I'm going to show her who I really am. She's not going to love me. And so they kind of take a left down this alley into the tenement slums of London at the turn of the century, and it's just like sewage and sex work and drunkenness, and like people are not doing well. And then so he's walking down the street and he's like, and here's where we would, if you pack 6 of us into this doorway, you wouldn't feel the chill. So it was interesting because thinking about how backstories are revealed, this was a pretty heavy-handed delivery of his backstory, but also it was effective, and I liked it more than it just being a mental exposition from the character or the person kind of just like
remembering.
Yeah, or just like verbal dumping it on the next person, like, hey, I'm going to download you like a Wikipedia page, my backstory.
I think the reason he did this is he was so offended that she said, oh, look, this is the orphanage that you funded. Aren't you so sweet and soft? And he was like, I'm going to show you what an asshole I am. Look where I came from. So he was almost arguing with her, and the evidence that he was bad.
I'm not lovable.
Showing all the poverty of his youth.
And then in the dirty alleys, she takes his hand. Mm-hmm. And kisses it, and he's just melts for the sweetness, and then she kisses him, and then he fucks her
and
against
then they
a brick
banged
wall.
Against a wall, and it, like her boots, or his boots, and her frill of her dress are like dragging in sewage.
Seems really gross.
So that was a little visceral, and then
immediately after, he's like, no, and so he throws her in a carriage and says goodbye forever. And that was about 68% of the book, and I was like, man, this like device is showing up a lot in my reading lately, where one of the characters, for the good of the other, to protect them in the long run, breaks up with them, acts cold, does something cruel so that they'll stay away from their whatever. And so I was a little bit bummed, but then it was great because it lasted like a page and a half.
It's really quick, and she never bought it at all. She was like, oh, I had a lovely time. Well, except for that part when you tried to push me away forever. But I knew that wouldn't last. I figured I'd give you one day, and then I'd just come back. And I think that the thing that changed his mind, where he said, you know what, I am in love with her, and I'm going to make this work,
goat.
Is Marigold, the goat, had her kid, and he was there, and they couldn't get any veterinarians, and Penny was off getting her gown ready for the next ball, and so he had, and it was like a breech. They saw the tail coming out first, so he had to like reach in there and birth this goat. And he was saying to himself, like, I could never let either of them die. I won't do that to Penny. And as he's like reaching his hand up into the marigold, he's saying, gosh, I must love her. So that's I haven't seen that particular moment of clarity on the page before.
No, that is a very clear. And I will say though, the first time he thinks that he loves her is mid dirty alley fuck. He's like, I love her, and I was like, huh.
Yeah, his associations in his own mind are
his timing.
A little funny. The first time she felt that I think I love him was like this passionate. I think they were having sex as well, but it was on a bed. It was romantic.
Satin pillows under the stars. There were fireworks.
Yeah, there were fireworks. His were a little bit seedier.
They were, or very primal, I guess. If close to his animal nature. So he falls in love with the kid, George. He names the goat. He keeps it. It's a pretty cute little scene.
So some dialogue that I really liked in this book, that's Penny talking to Gabe. And she says, You said you know how to spot undervalued things, undervalued people, and yet you persist in selling yourself short. So she's often giving him these little pep talks, and she just never believes his story that he's a bad guy with a rough demeanor. She just thinks, no, that's your exterior, and that's because of your environment. You're actually really, really good.
Yeah.
And he ends up believing her by the end of the book, which is sweet. Okay, so we're trying something new called If You Like This, Then You'll Like This. And I recognize that might not be the Dynamite title.
We love a longish slow burn on our Dynamite titles.
So if anybody has a better idea of what to call it. But in this case, if you like Delilah, the parrot in this book, then I think you will like Deal with the Bossy Devil by Kyra Parsi. That is book 1 in the Bad Billionaire Bosses series.
BBB.
BBB. And there is a parrot named Maxwell, and he's almost a character of the book. He's got a filthy mouth. He's just always insulting people, and
he's got a much bigger language.
Yes, a lot of vocabulary. And I didn't know I was a fan of parrot characters, but I've read a couple of books with him, and I really like it. It's just like a funny little humorous side character.
So I think it's inappropriate to say new kink unlocked because it's not sex related that you like this, but it's like a trope so we could call it a trink. New trink unlocked.
Okay, that's
also not catching on.
I'll think about it.
Awkward.
I'll think about it.
Yeah.
So this book, Deal with the Bossy Devil, is book 1 in the series. We reviewed book 2, Failure to Match, several months ago, and that book was also high in hijinks and humor, but the parrot's in the first book.
The parrot is in the first book, and it is actually, at first I was like, the parrot. I was crabby about it in that one, and it was
too.
Okay. And this book too, I was like.
The only thing that I didn't like about the parrot is because she had like a human feminine name. There were a couple times when I was reading Delilah, and I just thought that was Penny, and it really changed the scene for a few seconds until I realized, like, oh, that's not a human being.
That's a parrot.
That's a parrot. And not that Delilah and Penny sound alike, but it confused me. So good luck with that.
Good luck with that. So we're going to shake it up next episode. We are going to move out of this realm into the monster romance, dabbling in monster smut. It's Lily Mayne, Berries and Greed, which is very wacky, but it is the characters' nicknames. I have read one other Lily Mayne book a while ago. It was really cute and fun. I anticipate this will be somewhat in the same realm.
Mm-hmm. So read along if you'd like to.
Berries and Greed by Lily Mayne. This was The Wallflower Wager by Tessa, and Tessa has a huge collection of historical romance, and I think it was a fun read without being like, there's a lot of historical romance that isn't exciting for me to read, and this was fun and felt in a modern voice, even though it was also historical.
Mm-hmm. I like this one.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon. Happily ever after.
Bye.